Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Spirit of Texas Author Spotlight. I'm Lauren Scott, Chair of the Spirit of Texas Reading List Committee. In this episode, we are excited to welcome Spirit of Texas 2023 honoree Holly Green, author of In the Same Boat. Joining us for this interview is Spot Committee member Sandra Naranjo. Sandra is one of the librarians at Biblioteca Las Americas, serving South Texas ISD in Mercedes, Texas. She has 29 years of experience in education, including 17 years as an elementary and secondary librarian. Sandra is passionate about providing diverse literature to readers, providing quality programming for her patrons, and spending time with her family. This is Sandra's third year on the Spirit of Texas Reading List Committee. All right, Sandra, take it away.
All right, I would like to introduce Miss Holly Green. Her lifelong dream is writing. When she was 5, Holly told anyone who would listen that she was going to write a book about a girl named Mary who had to go through a maze. She cut up pieces of paper to do the writing part, yet for years she cut up pieces of paper and stapled them together to make her book. Holly just didn't know how to do the writing part yet. For years, she kept notebooks full of stories she'd start but never finish. Because it turns out there's more to writing than just being able to put words on paper. Holly Green grew up in North Texas and now lives in Austin. When she's not writing, swimming, or adulting, Holly loves to read, travel, hike, and of course, canoe. So welcome, Holly.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here today.
We're excited to talk about your book. Can you tell us what inspired you to write In a Small Boat?
So in 2012, my husband decided to do the Texas Water Safari, which is a canoe race that starts in San Marcos in Central Texas, and it goes all the way to the coast. And as he raced, I followed along and I went to all the water stops, and I just became so fascinated by this race and by the people who did it and the grit that it took to do it. And I just absolutely loved the experience. And I started imagining what it would be like to be a teenager doing it, because I saw young people doing the race. And I started to wonder what it would be like to have to do the race with somebody that you really didn't like, and how hard that would be to go through all the pain and all the teamwork required. And so that was kind of how Sadie and Cully's story was born, was just following that race. And the River Odyssey is, if you know the book, it's about 2 kids who do the Texas River Odyssey, and the River Odyssey is, absolutely inspired by the Water Safari. It's definitely based on that.
How did you come up with you just answered how did you come up with the idea of writing a book about the Texas River Odyssey? But you answered that, right? What kind of research did you have to do for this book?
I did a lot of research that I hadn't expected I would be doing when I first conceived of the book. I kind of thought like, I followed, my husband raced 3 years in a row, and I followed him every year. And I was just like, I've been in a canoe. I've followed this race for 3 years. I know how this works. And I, started writing, and then it was time to put them in the boat. And I realized, I actually have no idea what it's like to actually, be canoeing down this river, what it looks like between water stops, what it's like, how to hold the paddle correctly. I realized, I actually don't know anything. And so I went and took canoeing lessons from Holly Orr, who is a veteran paddler, and she has a paddling training company called Paddle with Style, which I always like to plug her because she was such a good teacher and such a good resource, because she first paddled when she was a teenager. And so, I talked to her, I took canoeing lessons with her on the San Marcos River. I read lots of articles. There's a memoir about the water safari that came out before my book called Paddlefish. I read that. There's lots of articles out there about the race. And so I read those. I interviewed racers. I asked my husband lots and lots of questions. I would sometimes write a scene and be like, does this actually work? And he'd be like, well, you need to change this and this. And then I also watched YouTube videos. So like anytime I was writing a scene and I needed to know what it looked like, I would Google that location on YouTube, or I would Google image search that location. And I would also go to YouTube and I would look for water safari videos of that location. And sometimes I'd find them. I always had Google Maps open to satellite view. And so as Sadie and Cully paddled down the river, I would just, scroll down the river in satellite view. So I would always know where they were. Lots of stuff like that. And then finally, it wasn't until I had a full draft that I did some canoe races. And so I did some races that were in Austin, and then I did the Texas Water Safari Junior, and that's the first 16 miles of the race.
Oh, wow.
And so I paddled with a friend who has done the race several times. And so we paddled from the not quite the start of the race, a little bit downriver of the start of the race to Staples Dam, which is the first checkpoint in the race. And I actually went and rewrote the first 16 miles of the race and incorporated a lot of that experience into it. So that's some of it.
It sounds like you had to do a lot of research. How much time did you spend researching?
Well, it was kind of just done as needed. So I couldn't quantify it really. But I will say that I conceived of the book in, 2012. I didn't really start writing it in earnest until probably 2014, 2015. And then I probably finished it in 2018. So I was not writing constantly. It was very much done in spurts, on and off. And I would have a year where I really didn't work on it. So it was a long process. That's what I can tell you.
Definitely sounds like it.
Very.
What part of the book was the hardest for you to write?
Oh, that's a really good question. I always knew somewhat where it started. The beginning changed. I always knew about where it ended. So a lot of writers talk about the saggy middle, and that definitely was where I struggled. And so kind of probably a little past the start of the race to probably the middle of the race. That was probably the hardest to kind of figure out what was driving the story.
Right. Would you consider writing a sequel to In a Small Boat so that the reader would know what happens next to Sadie and Cully?
Well, I don't know that there's a sequel, but in the paperback that came out in June, there is an epilogue that takes place a year later. So you can get a glimpse of what happens a year later if you read the paperback. And I could maybe see a sequel in the future, but I'm not certain.
if you were to write a book about one of the side characters, who would you pick and why?
Probably Erica. I just really like Erica. And actually, I would love to do a book that had both Gonzo and Erica, because I loved them both so much and they were both so fun to write.
So are you working on anything currently that we can be excited about coming to our shelves?
It's still in too early of a phase to really talk about. I can say that what I'm working on is another outdoorsy Texas adventure with a strong heroine.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure some of the, I'm going to throw like a fun question out there. What is your favorite book or author?
That's an impossible question. But let me think about some favorites. So one book that I went back to several times and that I took a lot of inspiration from in working on In the Same Boat was Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater. I love everything about that book. I love the horses and the racing. I love Puck and her fiery spirit. I love the way that she turns a phrase. She does it beautifully. And then the slow build romance between Puck and Sean, I just think is done so beautifully. I also really love Jellicoe Road by Melina Marchetta. That one is beautiful in the friendships between the kids and the way you slowly learn more about the characters. I just love that one so much. I could go on and on.
It's hard to pick a favorite book because there's so many books out there.
It is.
But I know I really enjoyed reading yours when I read it.
So much.
What did it feel like to see your book on the shelf for the first time?
Really, really exciting and also kind of terrifying. Because, you just don't know how something's going to be received and you want it to be received well. But so exciting to share their story with other people and to also let people in on this piece of Texas history that a lot of people don't know about, because it's such a cool race and such a cool community. So yeah, it was scary and it was amazing and a dream come true.
You mentioned earlier that the middle of the book seemed to be where you kind of was hardest.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you find hard when you're writing? Do you get distracted easily? Let's tell our students, what happens?
Everything's hard. There's a reason it took so long. So inventing people out of air is so hard. I had a really hard time nailing down the family dynamics in a believable way. I had a lot of people, the way I was writing the rivalry between the families, I had so many people be like, but it's just a canoe race. I'd be like, but it's a canoe race that people take really seriously, and to get that across in the right way was difficult. I really, let's see. I wanted to make sure that readers saw how Sadie and Cully are better together and why they belong together. So kind of working that out and just getting the characters right so that they fit well together, and they complemented each other. That took a lot of work. And I really didn't nail Cully down until I took the time to write a scene from his point of view. And then I was like, oh, I think I finally understand him. And then finding a balance with Sadie's dad, because I love him, and a lot of people have felt like he's too hard, and so I've tried to get across that he is a flawed character, but a redeemable one. That one was hard. I don't know. Everything was hard about it. I get really distracted very easily. I wrote it with a small child. So there's that. There's just making yourself sit down at the page. One of the things that I found really useful was every morning I would walk my dog, and then as I walked my dog, I would listen to a playlist that was all songs that reminded me of the book, and of the journey. And so I would kind of listen to those, and I would amp myself up, and then I would go sit down and write. Sometimes I would watch a water safari YouTube video ahead of time too, to like get me in the right mindset.
So you were talking about the characters developing. So you don't write characters based on anyone that you know? They're all created?
I mean, there are pieces of people that I know in all of them. Certainly nobody is directly somebody I know. I would never want somebody to read the book and be like, oh, that's me. Because I don't want to make a statement about anybody, but certainly there's a lot of me and Sadie. And, there's a lot of my husband in Cully. And there's some of me in Cully too. I do have a friend who did the cussing lamp with his children, and he's a safari racer. And so I did steal some of the best parts of Sadie's dad from him, things that he did. But all the negative parts of Sadie's dad are completely fictional.
So you've talked about the character development. What's the hardest part of developing then, since you're not basing them on people you know, on developing that character?
Everything, really. So you have to figure out what makes them tick, like what's driving them in each scene, what's their goal in that scene. And that was a really hard one for me for a long time. So I've kind of just put two people in a situation and not know where each one was coming from. And I finally figured out that I have to figure out, like, in every situation, each person has an agenda, and using that to like make things go forward. So really just in a whole world of possibilities, it's so hard to decide what some person, like some characters is, because I feel like they're real people and there's a right answer to it that I just have to suss out, and so I can't make a conscious decision sometimes, if that makes any sense.
Definitely. So you spent all this time writing this wonderful book. How did you get it published?
Well, I wrote it, and then I sent it to friends to read, and I got feedback. And then I even sent it to an editor to read, like a private editor to read and get feedback. And then once I felt like it was as good as I could possibly make it, I started querying agents. Getting an agent's the first step to publishing. And so I queried agents, and that whole process took at least 6 months. Yeah, it's a long process for a lot of people. For some people, it's really short. I wasn't one of them. And so you write emails to agents saying who you are, what your book's about, and then they all have different requirements. So you paste in like the first 10 or the first 20 pages of your book. And then if you're lucky, they reply to you and they ask to see more. So once I finally signed with my agent, he gave me feedback. We had a phone call and he gave me feedback on the book, and he had some really insightful ideas. I thought that his ideas were really, really helpful. And I went back and I did a revision that incorporated his feedback on the book. And I felt like it was a much stronger book for his feedback. And once he, read through it and we decided that it was as good as we could make it, then he sent it off to a short list of editors. And that's the submission process. And the editors read it and they get back to you. And so within 6 weeks, we had an offer from Scholastic for the book. And I started working with my editor, Maya Marlette, who has been a joy to work with. And what always sticks out to me is that the offer for the book came on March 12th of 2020. And then the next day, everything shut down.
Oh, no.
So it was just like, oh, I've got this offer, this book, and apparently I'm never leaving my house again.
So did the book get delayed then in publishing because of COVID?
No,
That's
I
good.
was actually incredibly lucky because usually it's about 2 years between selling your book and it coming out. But Maya thought that it was in good enough shape as it was, that it was about a year and a half, maybe even not quite a year and a half before the book came out. So it was actually a really fast process. And I do know that some books got delayed, but I was very fortunate that mine wasn't one of them.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience today?
I don't know off the top of my head. Just that I hope if you read the book that you enjoy it, and know that I had a lot of fun writing it.
Well, we thank you so much, Holly, for your time and for sharing with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
We really enjoyed your book, really.
Thank you.
It's worth the read.
Thank you.
It definitely is. Well, thank you for joining us today for our Spirit of Texas Author Spotlight with Holly Green. Be sure to check out our Spirit of Texas website for book club activities, read-alikes, and more for In the Same Boat and all of our 2023 Spirit of Texas books and authors. Stay tuned for our next episode coming soon to the Texas Library Association's Young Adult Roundtable YouTube channel and to our Spirit of Texas website. Thank you again, Holly, for your time today, and Sandra for your questions.
Thank you, Holly. Seriously, I loved your book.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.